And on tonight's roundtable, Maura Carlin sits with Westchester County Legislator Catherine Parker to discuss anti-Semitism and racism in Westchester.
Welcome to the Roundtable. I'm Maura Carlin. Tonight I'm joined by Westchester County Legislator Catherine Parker, who represents District 7, which covers Larchmont, Mamaroneck, Rye, and parts of New Rochelle and Harrison. I'm also joined by Stu Hackerl of the Greenburgh Human Rights Committee and the Reverend Doris Dalton of the Westchester Human Rights Commission. Please join our conversation by getting in touch with us. The information is on your screen now. So I think a good place to start is with hate crimes, especially given that there have been recent incidents just this week. You had in Katona some white nationalist groups soliciting membership, and last month you had swastikas and Nazi-themed posters on the SUNY Purchase campus. So let's talk about these incidents. Is it new to Westchester?
I don't think it is new to Westchester, sadly. You know, going back to 2016, around the time of the election, within the first 10 days after the election, there were several incidents that had happened right here in our district that I thought were really concerning. You know, there was an African-American woman that was in Manor Park who a group of teens had walked by and she was called the N-word. There, you know, were students in another high school who had their parents were immigrants, and the kids were taunting them, saying that your parents are being deported today. And one student actually had a panic attack and had to be taken to the hospital. So there have been incidents all along. And by the way, what happened in Katona also happened in Mamaroneck last week as well, where the same group had posted basically a call to join this alt-right group.
Where in Mamaroneck? Just
by the CVS, the walkway. There was
the one in the village of Mamaroneck.
Yes,
that's no longer there.
Yes, correct. Okay. And so they've been targeting different locations throughout the county. I think they had spent a good deal of time blanketing the Westchester Community College last year, again trying to get people to join. And as soon as we heard about it, somebody, because Westchester Community falls underneath our county government, so the school was on top of it and took those signs. So it's unfortunate that this is happening, but we have seen, I think, a new group of people that are, racist or anti-Semitic that are willing and emboldened to go out there.
Is it a new group, or is it people who are speaking out of things that they might not have said before?
Well, I think it's that they're emboldened now, and they feel that there's a message coming, and I think it's nationally, that they don't have to hide in the closet any longer. They can be very bold about the fact that they are, again, of this alt-right, white nationalist identity.
In 2017, I actually sort of kept track of news-reported incidents, and I counted, and obviously it's not necessarily completely accurate, but I counted 18. And in 2018, I actually counted many fewer. Is that accurate? Has it gone down since 17?
No,
so tell us about that.
It's gone up. I mean,
what kinds of incidents?
Well, there's many things. In terms of crimes, I mean, there's been death threats based on people's ethnic origin. Paul Feiner, who's the town supervisor of Greenburgh, was threatened with death, and he was insulted because of his religion. And the person was arrested for that, and that's a crime. It's a hate crime. So there's that. But there's also the incidents. There's also the leafleting. There's swastikas painted on various synagogues, on street signs, on nursery school doors. And there has been an uptick. I mean, we have 41, and I didn't know about the Mamaroneck, so there's 42. And that's 40 in the last 2 years. And I think that Catherine is right. There is a sense that these people feel they have permission to do this now because the messaging that's coming out of Washington is consistent with that. And I think that that's a big danger that we face throughout the county.
Maura, may I also add another point? I agree with you about the numbers, but I think the numbers are actually much higher than what we're talking about right now because there's a great deal of underreporting that's happening, right? Because there's really not a good construct for us to be able to tell other people, or especially tell our public officials and also our police officers what's actually happening. Hate incidents are different from hate crimes. Right.
What's the difference?
So hate crimes, and I mean, Catherine, please help if you can, but hate crimes, I understand, are chargeable offenses as stated in penal codes in the local, state, and federal codes, right?
Can you give a concrete example? Like you threaten to kill someone because they're Black, Jewish,
physical
Muslim.
assault due to somebody's ethnicity, background, national origin, religion, things like that. But hate incident is not necessarily a chargeable offense. It's not necessarily a crime. It could be a verbal assault. It could be intimidation. It could be threats. It could be harassment. Right?
Like, and I think, yeah, that the you know, the ones that I mentioned earlier, those were reported on social media by the victim, saying, you know, I can't believe in this day and age that this is happening. But the victims themselves, the people that have, you know, had these epithets, you know, hurled at them, they recognized too that it wasn't a crime, so they didn't report it to the police. And they're really, again, social media has kind of become the way that we're finding out more and more. And I agree with what Reverend Dalton's saying, that I think the numbers that we're talking about, we really don't know the extent of the problem, because I think that many times people feel shame that somebody has attacked them in this way, and they may just want to forget the whole thing ever happened, and they may quietly, you know, just think, if I ignore this, it'll, you know, I can forget about it and get on with my life and my day.
There's an additional problem to that, which is the immigrant community. That's right. Because the immigrant community faces this all the time.
All the time. Yes.
And they don't report at all because they have, obviously, they have great fear of law enforcement in the current environment. So they're not reporting the incidents that are taking place to them.
Well, this is a good place for actually us to stop, take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk about what the county is doing. So stay tuned and, you know, participate. Let us know your questions and your comments.
Do you know how to request our services? Just go to lmctv.org. Under the service banner, click Forms. In our Forms section, you can apply to be a volunteer, learn about membership, learn about corporate underwriting, request a bulletin board, coverage, DVD dubs, equipment, and PSAs.
It's all a click away at lmctv.org.
Welcome back. So I want to start talking about what the county, Westchester County, is doing with response to respond to hate crimes and hate incidents. Who wants to start?
Well, I'll start, because this really began, I think, in terms of the county's formal response to it, began in Greenburgh with a swastika that was painted on a road sign in Ardsley. Now, of those 41 and now 42 incidents that we're aware of, 17 of them have happened in Greenburgh and in the Greenburgh village.
And is that why you're actually keeping a list?
Yeah, I am keeping an inventory. And as a result of this one in Ardsley, we wrote a letter to the county executive from the Greenburgh Human Rights Committee asking the county to take some definite steps. And one of those was to involve the Human Rights Commission, and that's, I think, how Doris got involved and how Doris and I actually met, if I remember.
That's right. That's right.
So I know that since County Executive Latimer has been in office, he sort of reconstituted, perhaps re-energized the Human Rights Commission. Doris, why don't you tell us what's going on at that level?
Sure. We do have almost an entirely new board of board members. We have a new focus. And one of the things that we are doing, of course, we're continuing to enforce the human rights law as it is encoded into the county law, but we're also beginning to understand that there is a great need for us to develop systems and procedures to respond to the rising number of hate incidents. So we're creating a collaborative, so we have a proposal to create a collaborative system for us to be able to respond to hate incidents between the Human Rights Commission, between the County Commission on Public Safety, and also working with the DA's office.
What does that mean to respond to?
Right. Right. So first of all, we have drawn up a definition of hate incidents, something of what I told you, but it's a little bit more expanded to give everybody a baseline of what it is we're talking about when we talk about hate incidents. Then we also have different things we'd like to see, which is training, giving some training and resources to municipal officers, to law enforcement, to school principals and superintendents, all the different cohorts and stakeholders across the community, anyone who can respond to hate incidents within schools, communities, anywhere in the community. And then we want to also do an educational outreach. Using the data that we gather from reporting from the databases, using the data we gather, we want to be able to create educational programs for children, for youth, for families, for adults, all across the county so that we can make sure that people understand what it means to be an upstander. How do we understand each other in terms of our rich diversity in Westchester County, and how we can respond and help each other fulfill our purpose is becoming a stronger Westchester community, one where people can understand and live out their lives with happiness and joy.
Let me ask you something about that educational component,
Sure.
Hasn't there been this kind of education, at least in schools, for decades? If you ask someone, they will say racism is wrong, anti-Semitism is wrong. They know that. They talk about upstanders versus bystanders versus antagonists, at least through my kids' entire education. So how would this be different?
I'm happy. I think that's a great question, and this is my response to that. I believe that we as a community need to do a better job of mirroring what these core values of inclusion and dignity for all and respect for all, we need to be able to mirror that in every single facet of our community, not just in schools, but also encoded into the law, also within our faith communities, also with anywhere we have public areas, so that children, as they're growing up, they can see these core values mirrored everywhere they go. It's not enough to be able to say, in school, I taught you this one thing, and then expect that you will learn it and you will carry it with you for the rest of your life. It has to be something that's inculcated into the very core of our values across the board.
And I really agree with what Reverend Dalton and Mr. Hackerl is, what they're saying about the importance of having the database first, to then take that information and know where you need to go and do the educational outreach. It's funny, again, going back to the early days after the election in 2016, I went to the Human Rights Commission website and I noticed there really wasn't a place on the website where you could just fill out an email and report an incident. And I thought, even something as simple as that would probably help the conversation.
At least help someone feel better that I can tell someone about that.
But it's one of the flaws, I think, that we see in Westchester is there's no systematic way to report. Things happen, town by town, village by village, municipality by municipality. There's really no coordination of this information in any one place, which is one of the things that I know that the county is trying to correct.
Well, one of the things that I've heard from people is almost a denial of there being a problem. Well, that doesn't really exist around here.
There's a problem. I think that is a real conversation that needs to take place. And here's where I think doing an education outreach program and getting the whole community talking about, the incidents that are happening. And I think that they are happening everywhere, in all of our communities. And we just need the data to back that up. But sadly, I think it's happening more than we'd like to believe.
Well, we have a viewer question. How do you reinforce what we just discussed at home? Okay, good question.
I think it's an excellent question. And
let me just interject, especially as kids get older, they're far more influenced by their friends, by classmates, people in school, than they are by their parents, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah. I thought about this recently. I attended the Martin Luther King talk at Hummocks the other week, and one of the questions that somebody had posed is, what can each of us do? And I do think that one of the things that we all need to take stock of is, who are we inviting into our home? Who are we having in for a meal? What sort of diversity is our children seeing interaction with their families? And our children, who are they playing with? And can we expand our circles so that we ourselves are sort of mirroring
the lack
that
of diversity as a cause of hate crimes or hate incidents?
It's a factor.
I think it's not causal, but I do think that there's probably a correlation by how insulated your life is. And so I think that that's something that we should all be taking note. Again, how much are we actually, do we have friends that are Muslim? Are we encouraging sort of an understanding of other cultures? Are we, is that something that our kids are seeing, happening at home? It sounds so small, but I think it's a big step.
And I also want to say, something's happened in Ardsley since that swastika was painted. And this coming weekend, they're going to have a community dinner where people who really don't know each other, many of whom are different ethnicities, will be getting together in different houses and coming together afterwards to discuss some of the things that they've learned.
And that's actually going to lead into our next segment, which is talking about what individuals and communities can do.
Right.
So stay with us. We'll be back after this message.
Did you know that if you missed the last government meeting, you can watch it on our website? Just go to lmctv.org, click on videos, then click on municipal meetings, scroll down to find the meeting you want, or use the search function in the upper right corner and type in the name or date of the meeting. Then watch. You can see the full agenda and jump to a specific agenda item.
It's all a click away at lmctv.org.
Hi, thanks for tuning in or staying with us for tonight's roundtable. I'd like to pivot to what should people do when confronted with hate or concerned about it in their communities?
Can I jump in? That's a great question. What I would like to see, first of all, is that folks get some training on how to become upstanders. There are several things that people can do, not be bystanders, but be upstanders. Actively take a role in protecting the person who's most vulnerable in the interaction, distracting the person who could be saying something, hurling the insults, calling in someone to assist you, someone who has perhaps more authority or power, if it's in a store, call over the store manager. Also go to different places like the Business Council, go to different businesses or communities of faith and ask them to take a role in educating others. There are several things that we can do. What I don't want us to see us do is say somebody else will take care of it. It's not my job, it's somebody else's job. It's Catherine's job, it's Stu's job, it's Doris's job. I want everybody to understand that this is something we do together.
Well, what do you think about, Stu, you were raising, community coming together and doing something, or various signs that have appeared over the years for supporting LGBTQ issues, or the religious symbols where it has all of them, or recently, although they're not new, the Hate Has No Home Here signs. What do you think about something like that?
Well, I happen to like the Hate Has No Home signs. I think that they do send a message of inclusivity, that all are welcome here. I mean, that's sort of the other side of that, and I think that is a positive message.
Now, there's recently been a controversy here where somebody felt targeted by those signs. There is a free speech component where you've got swastikas or hate speech that may not have violent components to it versus no hate speech, whatever one would call it. How do you reconcile that? Because there's a real conflict in dealing with this?
You know, the law is still developing on these questions. You know, there are laws against swastikas being in New York State. There are laws against swastikas.
Is that a state law?
Well, yeah, it's called aggravated harassment. It depends on where the swastika is placed, if it's directed at an individual as opposed to just someplace at random. So certainly, if a swastika is put on the front of a synagogue, that's a felony. That's a Class 3 felony, and you can be prosecuted for that. And it's a complicated question. We're not going to be able to answer it in a 7-minute segment, but I also think that what they've done in Larchmont is actually quite laudatory. In terms of their standing up for what they feel their community values are. We saw the same thing in Croton. Identity Europa, when the white supremacist group leafleted up there last summer. And
what did that community do?
They tore those signs down and put up their own, saying this is a place of love and not hate. And in Greenburgh, we had a number of community rallies as a consequence of the appearance of a lot of white supremacist activity, one of which had 700 people attended a year and a half ago. So there's a lot of community involvement and a lot of community interest in that. And I think that Westchester as a whole, when they're challenged in this way, likes to put the word out there that those values don't represent who we are in Westchester. And we have a different kind of atmosphere here. This is not white supremacist country. And I think that those who really...
What does that mean, white supremacist country?
Well, I don't feel like it probably, I don't know what it means, I just invented it. I think that what it probably means is they're not really welcome here.
May I say something else? I think that Westchester is a place where we're very diverse in a lot of different ways, religions, our nations of origin, our ethnicities. There are so many reasons why it's a wonderful place to be. I think what we need to be careful about doing is making sure that we are creating a place of invitation and welcome for all people. Of course, we're not all going to agree. Of course, there's going to be conflict. That's what happens in families, right? But there must also be a place where we can hear each other and say, I understand, let's get engaged in a dialogue, let's have a conversation instead of lobbying hate-filled.
Okay, so let me ask you something.
Yes.
What would your conversation be with someone from Identity Europa?
Okay, well, first of all, it wouldn't be me in a conversation. I would send in Stu.
And Stu wouldn't speak with him. So.
But there's a reason for that.
Okay.
That I would do that. I want to make sure that the dialogue is something that people would feel that there is a place of evenness and a place where we could be able to have a conversation equally. I'm not so sure that I would be welcome in a dialogue, right? But I want to make sure that I have allies who would be able to be engaged in dialogue when I may not be welcome in places. Do you understand what I mean?
I do.
Okay.
Is the county trying to have these kinds of dialogues?
I think, again, by sort of rejuvenating the Human Rights Commission in itself, that's certainly showing that they are understanding that we need a robust Human Rights Commission to be a part of this. To your question of what if you sat down with somebody from an alt-right group, I guess I would be willing to do that. I would be willing to hear about their experiences in life, because I suppose I would try in some way to find where we could
have common ground,
have common ground, and maybe it would be a lifeline to say, instead of choosing hate, choose something that's more positive. And I would probably try to do that. It's an interesting question, and I as I say, it would be interesting to have that conversation.
Beyond the Human Rights Commission, what is the county doing at this point?
Well, our focus with the Human Rights Commission has actually been on the laws. And one of the things that we've been looking at is not so much the hate incidents, but other areas where there's still discrimination in Westchester. So recently we passed the co-op disclosure law because we were still hearing of situations where people were getting denied home ownership, not for financial reasons, but for reasons that were probably based upon the color of their skin or their gender, their age, or the
Isn't there already
class.
law on the books about that?
But co-ops are, that is a separate, it's considered a corporation, so it was like a loophole that they still could, unfortunately, reject somebody without giving them any reason as to why they were being rejected. And we have written into the law that for every rejection that a co-op has, that they have to notify the Human Rights Commission. And then the Human Rights Commission is charged with reaching out to the applicant, finding out if they were in one of the protected classes, and if they're, and this has been in the case that they were always able to reach out to the Human Rights Commission. But it's informative that, again, the Human Rights Commission is there to help in these instances.
And is the Human Rights Commission going to then reevaluate whether whether they have the financial wherewithal, or whether their lifestyle, in the sense of noise and nuisance kinds of things, jive with the building?
Yes, basically, there's already fair housing laws that are right in the human rights law of the county. This would basically supplement what we're already doing, and be able to give us more space and room, and also another way to make sure that the laws of the county are being upheld, especially by co-ops.
Mm-hmm. We are actually out of time, but I'm going to give all of you an opportunity for anything else you want to add that we haven't gotten to.
I would just say one more thing. Recently, some members of the Human Rights Commission were able to meet with a group that came to us with concerns about Islamophobia that are also very much underreported in the county. I want us to understand that when we're talking about hate incidents, we're not just talking about anti-Semitic incidents or racist incidents. We're talking about all the different ways that the people of this county are being impeded and threatened and feeling very vulnerable. Hate incidents must be, I would like for us to be able to have more data in order to understand where hate incidents are happening, so please share them. I would urge anyone who's watching, share them with your legislator, with your municipal officer, also with your law enforcement officer, if that's possible.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine Parker, our county legislator, Stu Hackerl from Greenburgh, and Reverend Doris K. Dalton. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you all for watching. Stay with us, and we'll have more of The Local Live coming up.